the city of the Anunnaki. Archaeologists recently discovered an ancient metropolis over 200,000 years old in Africa. Some people think this metropolitan area was home to the legendary Anunnaki, the great celestial gods that came down from the heavens and gave human beings life. The Mesopotamians worshipped these beings as gods, yet nobody knows where they went. They just showed up on the planet, allowed the first great civilizations to worship them, and then they disappeared. At least that's the fun story. But in reality, they were most likely gods that faded over time, like the gods on Mount Olympus. Researchers discovered this bizarre city in southern Africa, in a remote region with very few humans. Locals have known about the ruins for centuries, but they never thought much about them that we know of. They thought the old broken walls were just the remnants of ancient farms. But this area was covered in gold deposits, most of which have been taken over the past 500 years. Some believe the Anunnaki settled here specifically to mine gold and created human workers using advanced genetic technology. Of course, this is all speculation. There may be some small ruins here, leftovers from an unknown ancient civilization. But they've only been seen through satellite images in the past and are heavily eroded. Mainstream scientists haven't said a word about this discovery, which, if true, would push back the date of the first great city on Earth by over 190,000 years. The Black Knight satellite. There is allegedly a spacecraft in near polar orbit around Earth, a ship of extraterrestrial origins that NASA is covering up. It's known as the Black Knight satellite, and nobody knows what it is exactly. Some have claimed it's nothing but space debris, while others say it's been orbiting our planet for over 12,000 years. During the STS-88 mission in 1998, a photograph was taken that appears to show a large black metallic object hovering in the void of space. According to James Oberg, a space journalist, it was nothing but a thermal blanket lost during the mission, but others say it's proof of the Black Knight satellite. Evidence of this mysterious satellite was supposedly first picked up in 1899 during radio experiments done by Nikola Tesla. Astonishingly, these same signals were picked up by Jørgen Hals in Norway back in 1928. Then, in 1954, researcher Donald Kehoe told local newspapers that the U.S. Air Force had 2 satellites in orbit around the planet, even though no country had such technology at the time. As you can surely imagine, scientists have denied any alien satellites in our orbit. However, that hasn't stopped the theory from circulating for over 120 years. The Gibelline Man. In 1896, a mummified man was discovered buried in a crouched position in Egypt. He was dated as being from the year 3500 BC. But after he was found, he was handed over to the British Museum and largely forgotten down in the labyrinths of storage. He became known as the Gibelline Man, and nobody knew much about him. But now, archaeologists and historians have taken a new interest in the forgotten mummy. Using the latest technology, scientists have been able to take a look inside this person, quite literally. We now know that this man could be the oldest victim of a cold case ever. According to physical anthropologist Daniel Antoine, the mummy was stabbed in the back by an unknown weapon. Archaeologists discovered a wound on the surface of his skin, but it was when they looked inside his body using special scans that they saw the extent of the damage. Researchers did a digital autopsy to explore this man's skeleton. They discovered that his shoulder blade had been damaged. They even found fragments of bone that were forced inward when he was stabbed. Even looking at his brain, the digital autopsy was able to show the presence of dehydrated cerebriform tissue, loose in his skull like candy in a piñata. There is no doubt that this man was violently murdered. He was between 18 and 21 when he died. Whoever did it maybe felt bad, since he was wrapped in a cheap linen shroud and then stuffed in a shallow grave. He wasn't mummified on purpose. It was the direct contact with the very hot and dry sand that kept his remains perfectly preserved for thousands of years. Perhaps the poor mummy will now get some peace. Underground Pyramid. Underneath Orvieto, Italy, there is a mysterious ancient underground pyramid made by the Etruscans. Archaeologists found the pyramid after excavating a wine cellar that had steps leading downward into tunnels and caves. Then they entered a chamber where the walls were carved to slope upwards, leaving a hollow pyramid structure, but they have no idea what it was for. The Etruscans built many underground chambers and tunnels, but this is the first time that archaeologists have discovered a structure like this carved out in a pyramid shape. The Etruscans reached their peak from the 8th to the 5th century BC in central Italy and were famous for their art, commerce, writing, and metalwork, but were absorbed by the Roman Empire. They left many secrets behind, including these tunnels and pyramids that were backfilled with dirt towards the end of the 5th century BC, although nobody knows why. Archaeologists think that there are several other pyramid structures under the city. As they dig out this one, they have uncovered many exciting artifacts, including over 150 examples of Etruscan language inscriptions and a wide array of ceramic materials. Now, archaeologists are trying to dig their way to the bottom of the pyramid structure and see what they can find. The Gujian blade. About 50 years ago, archaeologists discovered an unusual sword inside a Chinese tomb. This sword was over 2,000 years old, and it shocked archaeologists because it didn't have a single trace of rust. The blade looked perfect when they excavated it, and it even drew blood when an archaeologist pressed his finger against its edge. Somehow, this sword had not been affected by 2,000 years sealed underground. The craftsmanship was remarkable. The sword was covered in detailed markings, and it seemed too perfect for something crafted so long ago. It was so impressive that the government of China declared it a state treasure. And for the Chinese, this sword is now as famous as King Arthur's Excalibur. Archaeologists originally found the sword in 1965 while they were surveying the ruins of Jinan, the old capital of the Chu state. During the excavations, they came across 50 ancient tombs. They found over 2,000 artifacts, along with what came to be known as the Gujian sword. The sword was in a wooden box that had been placed next to a skeleton, untarnished, made from solid bronze, and still sheathed in the scabbard. It's a double-edged straight sword, one of the earliest types used in China, and according to the inscription on the sword, it belonged to the King of Yu. The big mystery is that archaeologists don't know which King of Yu owned the sword, and nobody knows how the sword remained so sharp while being stuck in a box for 2,000 years. Researchers believe it has something to do with the unique properties of the sword, but all these years later, nobody has replicated the technology used to make it or identify all of its specific properties. Mysterious tracks. Dr. Alexander Koltepin, a geologist from the Natural Science Scientific Research Center in Moscow, recently made an extraordinary assertion. Following an investigation in the Phrygian Valley of Turkey, Dr. Koltepin discovered tracks that he claimed were left behind by an intelligent race of creatures. These ancient individuals supposedly lived on our planet roughly 12 to 14 million years ago. According to the doctor, the mysterious site is marked with ruts cutting through deposits made from compacted volcanic ash. The tracks cut all across the landscape of the Phrygian Valley and may appear to have been there for millions of years. They resemble leftover tire marks of heavy vehicles, like what you might find after tanks have been driving through the mud. And while there were ancient civilizations living in the area, such as the Hittite Empire 3,500 years ago, these tracks were not made by carts or chariots. They appear to be left behind by modern vehicles, but were carved into the ground long before modern humans evolved. There is no logical explanation for what the doctor is proposing. He believes that 12 million years ago, there was another advanced society living on the planet. Maybe they were reptilian, or they could have been humans. Nobody knows for sure. However, if the doctor's claims are correct, they had access to heavy all-terrain vehicles. The tracks left by these machines were preserved just like dinosaur footprints, and scientists have yet to come up with any other realistic explanation for what might have created them. Nazi Iron Man Buddha. While traveling through Tibet in 1938, a group of Nazi soldiers came across an intriguing Buddhist sculpture of a man bearing what appeared to be a swastika on his belly. They hauled the 22-pound figure, nicknamed the Iron Man, back to Germany with them. It remained in the hands of a private collector until 2007. when experts finally got a chance to study it for the first time. In 2012, National Geographic reported that the statue was thought to date back to the 11th century, and that it was carved from a meteorite that landed between Mongolia and Siberia around 15,000 years ago. Elmar Buchner, who specializes in studying meteorites, told the BBC that the material, known as an attexite, is rich in cobalt and nickel. Based on its status as the only known figure carved from a meteorite, he estimated its value at around $20,000. Later that year, a new study challenged Buchner's findings, claiming that the Iron Man's features are inconsistent with traditional Buddhist statues. While the report agreed that it was carved from a meteorite, it argued that the sculpture was probably made during the 20th century. But nobody seems to know for sure, and most reports seem to agree with Buchner's analysis that the Iron Man was crafted 1,000 years ago. But the thing is that it is not that strange to have a swastika in Buddhism. This symbol has been used for thousands of years as a spiritual icon, and everyone loved it until Hitler stole it and ruined it. Too many black holes. A team of astrophysicists have made a shocking discovery out in the vastness of space. The team calculated the number of stellar mass black holes in the observable universe and came to an astonishing conclusion. They believe there are over 40 quintillion black holes lurking in the universe beyond our planet, accounting for a total of 1% of total normal matter in space. This is crazy for a few reasons. First of all, black holes were only theorized to exist until a few years ago. They had never actually been observed since they don't allow light to escape their gravitational pull. But in more recent years, scientists have figured out that black holes sometimes lurk at the center of massive concentrations of light-emitting matter. For example, there is a supermassive black hole at the center of our own Milky Way galaxy. They are now able to detect black holes by using advanced instruments like gravitational wave detectors. But basically, we went from never physically seeing a black hole to identifying around 40 quintillion of them. That's 40 billion billions spread out across 90 billion light-years of space. It looks like it's only a matter of time until one of these great destructors of reality swallows us whole. Dragon's Eye. The Hall of Giants stone mine in Lancashire, UK, is home to a metamorphic rock formation called the Dragon's Eye. It looks like a dragon that just woke up, and it might blink at any moment. The smooth, multicolored structure formed after a mine tunnel roof collapsed, exposing the different colored sediment. Curiously, official information about the site is conspicuously absent from the internet, but all signs point toward it being a real place. In late 2019, the YouTube channel Underground Explorer C9C posted a video showing first-hand footage of their trek into the mine that houses the Dragon's Eye, and their Instagram account features photos detailing the journey. Some pictures show the Dragon's Eye as rounded when it's actually flat, either because the adventurers who supposedly discovered the formation photographed it using a fisheye camera lens, or because the angle of the structure creates an optical illusion. It's hard to say for sure because no one is saying where it is. If you want to see the formation for yourself, you might have trouble determining its exact location within northern England. It appears as though those who know where the Dragon's Eye is are staying quiet about it. Considering the site's status as a collapsed mine, it's also likely that it is not safe and is not open to the public. Anti-gravity jars. About 300 years ago in India, anti-gravity jars were created. These magical jars could be filled with water, flipped upside down, and no water would come out. 3 centuries ago, seeing the magic jar in action blew people's minds. They didn't realize what they were seeing was just science, and they thought they were seeing magic. You can see one of these jars at the Museum of Kanchipuram. It was made of clay, but it has no top opening to fill it up. The only way to fill the jar with water is to flip it over and then pour water through the 5 holes at the bottom. When you flip the jar back over, not a single drop of water leaks out from any of the holes. The only way to get the water out is by pouring it through the spout at the top. There aren't any moving parts inside the jar. Instead, an unknown genius figured out how to fit twin funnels and a 90-degree bent pipe inside the jar to make it seem like magic. We don't know who invented the jar, but we know where it first appeared, in a village called Karigiri. The potters here were so creative that they built over 100 varieties of magic jars. although there are only 12 left today, and they are all in museums. The 10 Plagues of Egypt. Every year, Jewish people around the world celebrate Passover in April. The holiday is meant to commemorate when the Jewish people left Egypt, crossed the Red Sea with Moses, and took their place in the Holy Land. It also observes the 10 plagues that God unleashed on the ancient Egyptians. According to the biblical tale, the Pharaoh refused to allow Moses to free the enslaved Israelites, and so God sent down a series of plagues to devastate Egypt and put pressure on the Pharaoh. God turned the water to blood, released a plague of frogs, lice, and flies, and made the livestock sick. He gave the Egyptian people boils, unleashed a swarm of locusts, blocked out the sun, and killed all the firstborn children in the city. What scientists have failed to explain is just how accurate the plagues of Egypt really were. One theory argues that a volcanic eruption on the Greek island of Santorini is to blame. Microbiologist Ciro Trevisanato claims the eruption happened in 1600 BC, and that the wind carried volcanic ash from Greece all the way to Egypt. Supposedly, mixed in with the volcanic ash was toxic acid. There was also the mineral cinnabar, which could have turned the rivers red, resembling the color of blood. The acidity would have caused frogs to jump out of the water looking for somewhere clean. Acid rain likely fell from the sky and caused people to have boils. The grass would have been contaminated, thereby killing all the animals who ate it. Locusts would have thrived in this environment, looking like a plague from God. And the eruption would have caused many days of darkness because of all the ash in the atmosphere. While scientists can't explain everything in the Bible, there does seem to be a perfectly reasonable explanation for the 10 biblical plagues. As for the deaths of the firstborn children, Trevisanato suggests they may have been sacrificed by their own parents out of desperation to stop the catastrophes. What do you think of this theory? Let me know in the comments below.
White Shaman Mural. 4,000 years ago, one or more members of an ancient hunter-gatherer tribe covered the wall of a limestone rock cave in southwestern Texas with a collection of images. The 26-foot-long rock canvas includes abstract depictions of deer gods, moon goddesses, fire sun deities, cloud serpents, and other spiritual beings. There is also a tall, headless, human-like figure that gives the White Shaman Mural its name. It's one of several collections of paintings that can be found on rock shelters throughout the region. They were created by the hunter-gatherers who inhabited the area between 2500 and 500 BC. Experts have known about the artwork for a long time, but they are not much closer to understanding it now than they were when they first learned about it. The images are unique to the point of defying explanation. Several theories have been put forth, including the possibility that shamans created the paintings to depict hallucinations that they were experiencing while using drugs. On the other hand, archaeologist and former artist Carolyn Boyd thinks that the White Shaman and other artwork reflect the spiritual beliefs of their creators. She even believes that if experts take a hard enough look at the pictures, they'll be able to read them. In other words, to understand them as their original creators did. Unlike some researchers who think that the White Shaman mural was painted by many people over time, Boyd believes it was conceived and created as a single piece of artwork. Considering how big it is, she said that the artist must have used some type of primitive scaffolding in order to get the job done. Boyd has suggested that the painting depicts the birth of the sun and the beginning of time. Nobody else seems to understand the artwork as deeply as she does, but there is also truly no telling whether she's right or not. The closest we'll ever get, without being able to ask the creators themselves, is by coming up with a theory that everyone can agree makes the most sense. New York UFO. New York City resident Hamid Vitalis made a strange discovery in the night sky as he walked to work in Brooklyn. He was right across the river from Manhattan when he looked to the heavens and saw 3 shining orbs of light forming a pyramid. These orbs of light were hovering over the city. Definitely not airplanes and certainly not helicopters. They weren't making any noise, and they seemed to be higher up in the atmosphere than any aircraft should be. Hamid pulled out his phone and started filming. That was when an airplane flew beneath the lights, and 2 of them disappeared immediately while the third slowly dimmed before it vanished as well. So, what did Hamid discover in the night sky? He posted the video online and asked for help from astronomers to identify the mysterious UFOs. Some suggested the lights could have been sky lanterns, but aviation experts disagreed because the lights were obviously too bright for that. They were too bright to be a drone. They couldn't have been airplanes landing at the airport because they disappeared altogether instead of slowly descending. In any case, we still don't know what was seen that night in New York. It's fascinating because most UFO sightings happen in the countryside, out in the woods, or somewhere there's not a lot of people. But this was a mass sighting event with multiple people in the city agreeing that they too saw the Pyramid of Light before it vanished without a trace. What do you think it was? Let me know in the comments below. Bavarian Goblin Holes. There are over 700 strange underground chambers and tunnels dating back to the Middle Ages throughout the German state of Bavaria, linking churches, farmhouses, cemeteries, and seemingly random parts of the forest. Some local legends claim that elves built and lived in the structures, nicknamed Goblin Holes, while other stories allude to the tunnels being part of an extended system of emergency exits from castles. It makes sense that the Goblin Holes are associated with small forest creatures. Most of the chambers in the labyrinth of vaults, also known as an Erdstall, measure just 66 to 164 feet long at the most. Explorers must often walk in a hunched position and even crawl on all fours in some places, where the tunnel's height shrinks to just 2.25 feet high or less. The Erdstall is no secret to locals, and similar networks exist in other parts of Europe, including Austria, Hungary, and Spain. Nobody knows what these uncomfortably narrow passageways were used for, especially considering how their size makes them impractical for food storage or as a dwelling, and there is no evidence they housed animals. Few artifacts have turned up inside the tunnels, and they are completely absent from historical records. In 2011, archaeologists began exploring the system in hopes of learning more about its origins and uses, but they never announced any groundbreaking discoveries or even any clues that could help bring them one step closer to solving the lingering mysteries surrounding the Goblin Holes. And now for number 7. But first, want to give a big shout out to Lori Carter for supporting this channel. Thanks so much to all of our subscribers, and if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on the latest videos. The Great Mechanism. One of the most mysterious things ever pulled out of the ocean has got to be the Antikythera mechanism, dubbed the world's first computer. Sponge divers found it near the Greek island of Antikythera back in 1901. The computer is about the size of a shoebox, a bizarre contraption made of gears and dials, and it almost looks like the insides of a giant clock. You may have heard about the world's first computer before, but what I'm about to tell you is brand new. Archaeologists believe they have finally figured out the time when this mechanism first started ticking. December 22nd, 178 BC. This was not an easy conclusion to make. Scientists have been struggling for 120 years to figure out who made the device, why they made it, and what they used it for. Recently, there has been a lot of speculation about ancient aliens and the mechanism being a lost component to one of their machines. But the mechanism had probably been used as a type of calendar. The machine could predict when the next eclipse would happen, it could determine when athletic games were to take place, and other things like that. Researchers with the Functional Reconstruction of Antikythera Mechanism project got the start date by looking at the earliest day that any calculation on the machine could be made. There was a solar eclipse on December 22nd that lasted over 12 minutes, and December 23rd is the winter solstice. It makes sense that the machine that predicted eclipses was activated on the same day as one. There's still a lot of mystery here. We don't know how the mechanism was made, who figured out the complicated math, or who was going to use it. Talakadu. There is a mysterious place in Karnataka, India that scientists just can't wrap their heads around. It's called Talakadu, and it's a miniature desert in a location that doesn't make sense. At the one edge of the desert is a lush and dense forest, and on the other side is a river. In between the jungle and the river is a long stretch of barren wasteland, like someone transported a chunk of the Sahara Desert here. According to legend, the desert sands were brought to Talakadu because of a curse. In the 16th century, a woman named Ala Milama was scorned by the Mysore kings who once ruled the region. Allegedly, she cursed their lands to be covered in sand. Scientists are always doubtful when it comes to curses, but there is no mistaking the strangeness of the situation here.
In Talakadu, there are multiple buildings and ruins from antiquity. There appear to be at least 5 Shiva temples on the surface, and several temples supposedly lost under the sand. Curse or no curse, something happened here roughly 400 years ago that buried the structures in the sand, and sadly, nobody knows what caused it.
Bison Massacre. Around 500 BC, a group of people from the little-understood Northern Plains culture of North America left behind a wealth of artifacts in what is now Alberta, Canada. The collection includes bone fragments from 65 or more bison, who appear to have been butchered in a single event, as well as over 100 stone points made from a type of rock that's only found 620 miles away in North Dakota. Perhaps the most peculiar artifacts of all were a series of 8 bison bone arrangements found beneath a layer of scattered bones and tools. Archaeologists scrambled to excavate the site, located just north of the Montana border, after finding evidence of looting in 2015. It appeared as though the ancient hunters had ambushed the bison by herding them into a marshy area surrounded by dunes, giving the animals limited options for escape. Furthermore, the presence of 2 different types of projectile points at the site indicates that there were 2 different cultural influences in the area at some point in time. Neither point seemed to be from the immediate area, with one style resembling points that are usually found further to the east, while the other resembling projectiles that were used by groups based in the Dakotas. The groundbreaking discovery suggests that these groups lived in the Alberta area 2,500 years ago, before one migrated northward and the other went west. These findings pose several questions about how and why the cultures moved other places, as well as what the dynamics of their trade relationships were. And of course, there's the bison bone sculptures. They may have been ritual offerings, but their purpose is truly a mystery. The headhunters of Coney Island. In 1905, members of a Filipino tribe were brought to the Coney Island Amusement Park in New York. These tribesmen were members of a group of headhunters, poached straight out of the Philippines to be used in a sideshow. The headhunters performed mock tribal ceremonies, ate raw dog meat, and horrified millions of Americans who paid money to gawk at them. They were called the Igorotes, and they have mostly been forgotten. The fact that they were brought over on a boat to entertain Americans who had a bizarre fascination with what they thought of as savages has most certainly been buried. Journalist Claire Prentice recently dug up historical records to discover the truth behind this bizarre story. It turns out a man named Truman Hunt traveled to the Philippines in 1898 during the Spanish-American War. He was a trained medical doctor and somehow managed to become the lieutenant governor of Bontoc, where the Igorotes lived. In 1904, the American government spent a whopping $1.5 million to transfer 1,300 Filipinos from several different tribes to St. Louis. It was part of a scheme designed to get the American people to be more supportive of America's policies on the other side of the world in the Philippines. Truman was hired to look after the Igorote tribespeople where they were staying in the United States. They were so popular with the locals that he went back to the Philippines, got more headhunters, and brought them to Coney Island. He then turned them into a human zoo. He even brought dogs from the local New York pound so that they could chop them up and cook them in front of paying customers. Poor puppies. In the end, it became something of a shame in the eyes of the government. The doctor was hunted down and tried for immoral behavior, and the government sent all of the headhunters back home. Underground orchid. Australia is famous for its unique wildlife, but it is also home to many bizarre plants, including 1,550 orchid species, nearly all of which grow nowhere else on Earth. Perhaps the strangest among these flowers is the rhizanthella, more commonly known as the underground orchid. It's small, pale, smells like vanilla, and as its name indicates, spends its entire life underground. Reporting for The Conversation, botanist Mark Clements explained that a farmer in Western Australia discovered the unusual flower in 1928 and sent samples to experts at the Western Australian Herbarium for identification. Then, in 1931, an orchid hunter discovered another underground orchid in New South Wales on the eastern side of the country. Clements, who has worked extensively with these flowers, identified yet another new species of underground orchid last year, bringing the total known rhizanthella species up to 5. Underground orchids bloom after spending most of their lives as a thickened underground stem or a rhizome.
Even after a flower blossoms, the plant remains entirely underground but near the surface, covered in soil and dead leaves. All Rhizonthala species are either endangered or critically endangered, except for the newly discovered variety, which Clemens said is probably highly vulnerable. Experts struggle to conserve underground orchids because they are very difficult to find and grow, and little is known about the flower's biology. To save them from extinction, scientists will have to learn more about them and locate more populations. Martians in Japan. If you haven't heard the theory that a cataclysmic event happened on Mars hundreds of years ago and forced all the inhabitants to settle on Earth, now you have. It's completely outrageous. There is no evidence to support that a war on the Martian surface forced everyone to move one planet over, but some people are convinced. To help back up this bizarre theory, a connection has been made between a rock formation on the red planet and a historical structure in Japan. The Japanese made the Kofun tomb look like a giant keyhole. It is an immense burial mound still holding the remains of a long-dead Japanese emperor. The tomb is so big that it's still one of the largest monuments ever built, measuring over 1,500 feet long. A similar structure was found on the Martian surface using satellite images. It's dusty and red, yet it looks just like the keyhole burial mound in the Osaka prefecture of Japan. There is no denying the distinct keyhole shape is nearly the same. Conspiracy theorists argue that the one on Mars could be the remnants of an ancient burial mound, proving that humans might have lived on Mars. Or it could just be a coincidence, and the keyhole-shaped structure on Mars could just be a normal rock formation. Doorway on Mars. In 2022, NASA's Curiosity rover discovered something unbelievable on the surface of Mars. Something so crazy, there's no way to explain it, but we're gonna try. The rover took a snapshot of what appears to be a doorway on Mars, a rectangular portal leading into the side of a rocky dune, like the entrance of some prehistoric Egyptian tomb. If confirmed, this would have been an extremely impressive discovery, especially since no other proof of intelligent life has ever been documented on the red planet. Sadly for the world, NASA immediately denied the existence of a doorway. They released a tweet saying that it looks like a doorway, but it's only a geological feature. NASA tried to convince everyone that it was their own minds making sense of the unknown. The rock formation Mount Sharp is where the picture was taken, a place littered with open fractures leading down into the darkness of the red planet. The doorway, although it looks large in the image, is only about 12 inches high. It would only be big enough for a person, or an alien, less than a foot tall to enter. Nobody knows if NASA's lying about the dimensions of the doorway or if they're telling the truth. Either way, some people argue it's obvious in the image that it's been crafted by tools into a perfectly rectangular door frame. It's way too impeccable, straight-edged, and well-aligned to be a natural formation. At least, it sure looks that way.
Ravana's dead body. The Ramayana is an ancient Sanskrit epic from India. It's one of the most important Hindu texts in existence, and also one of the longest in the world, with over 24,000 verses. The story tells of a prince named Rama as he's exiled to the forest by his father, King Dasharatha, at his stepmother's request. Always the evil stepmother. For years, Rama wanders the Indian subcontinent with his wife Sita and his brother Lakshmana. At some point, Sita is kidnapped by Ravana, the king of an island fortress called Lanka. A war erupted, and thankfully Rama won and was crowned the new king. There are many different versions of the Ramayana, and it plays a major role in many people's lives and spiritual beliefs. Scholars don't know for sure if it's a true story, but many people believe that it is, and that there are historical sites where certain events from the Ramayana took place. There are reportedly at least 50 such sites in Sri Lanka, where some even believe that Ravana's dead body has been lying in a cave, perfectly preserved, for the last 10,000 years. One tourism website claims that Ravana was laid to rest in a coffin inside of a cave that sits 8,000 feet above sea level. Supposedly, his body looks no different than the day he was left at the site, owing to the magical preservation effects of a special paste that was slathered onto the outside of his casket. What's more, the coffin is said to measure 18 feet long and 5 feet wide. There is allegedly a collection of buried treasure beneath the burial, but nobody's managed to get their hands on it because it's guarded by a snake and other fierce animals. Some would argue that this could all be true, while to others it sounds like an obvious tall tale. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And now for number 5. But first, want to give a big shout out to Cynthia Molière and DJ Chark. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us in our little corner of the internet. If you are new here, welcome! And be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. Forgotten structures. Archaeologists in Peru have been using the latest technology to discover forgotten structures from the ancient past. Researchers use drones and lasers to explore around the Inca complex called Chabamba. It was a ceremonial center built over 500 years ago at the same time as Machu Picchu, dedicated to the worship of water. The drones and lasers helped them to identify new structures that nobody had ever seen before. In particular, they found forgotten housing units once used by the local female leaders of the religious center. The ruins of Chabamba were originally found in 1940. The abandoned complex is beside an old Inca road and was used for 2 main purposes. It was a religious center where rituals took place, and it functioned as a gatehouse to the entrance of Machu Picchu. But the area has proved hard to study because of mudslides and the fact that the ruins are entangled deep in the jungle. The only simple way to find new stuff is by using radar. All the researchers have found so far are 12 structures near the ceremonial center that were likely inhabited by the rulers and gatekeepers. However, archaeologists are hopeful they can still find more secrets hidden in the jungle. Secret rooms. While renovating the historic 3-story commercial exchange building in Jackson, Michigan last year, workers noticed that a piece of heavy machinery was sinking into the ground, leading to their discovery of 2 large, unused underground rooms. Nobody knows what the rooms were used for. The discovery baffled Sharon Buchti, the building's operations manager, and all the other employees. "We're all just blown away. It's a big mystery at this point," Sharon said. The building's owner had no idea the rooms existed. Both rooms are made from the same concrete blocks as the rest of the building and were found empty, minus some rusty pipes and a 28-inch long chute. One room measures 12 by 14 feet, while the other is 12 by 17 feet. In an interview with MLive, Charlie Buchti, a member of the work crew that found the room, said, "I was hoping to find some hidden treasures in there from who knows when. We're still researching, so fingers crossed we get to find something." Either way, Buchti said that he was happy to partake in the mysterious and historic discovery. The commercial exchange building was built in 1895 after the building that occupied the site before it burned down. It served as a manufacturing facility until the 1960s when it was renovated into office space. During that time, crews found carriage parts that were left behind by builders who once worked at the site. Local historians believe the rooms, which sat beneath grass and debris prior to their discovery, were constructed with the rest of the building. Records show that there was originally a structure above them, but it was apparently taken down at some point. While experts admitted that they may never know what the spaces were used for, Harrison Marcotte, a curator for the local Ella Sharp Museum, believes that they housed steam kilns that were used for drying lumber. The team told the local news that they are open to other ideas and that they welcome input from internet sleuths and locals who think they might be able to solve the mystery, so you know what to do. Crusader hand grenades. Archaeologists have discovered ancient ceramic pots in Jerusalem. Scientists say the Crusaders used these strange pots, which were made in the 11th and 12th centuries, as hand grenades. This would make them some of the first hand-thrown explosives in the world. But scientists aren't 100% sure yet. They know these ceramic pots were used for all kinds of different things. Ancient people used them to hold mercury, as containers for oil, and just to drink out of. But new research by the Griffith University in Queensland has shown that at least one vessel contained potentially explosive material. The other 3 shards they looked at contained traces of oils and medicines. The 4th one had traces of sulfur, magnesium, and mercury. It could very well be that the Crusaders had figured out how to turn black powder into a devastating aerial bomb. Black powder was invented in ancient China and brought to the Middle East and Europe in the 13th century, right around the time Europeans made these pots. Wormholes. Wormholes are a phenomenon that scientists can't explain, mostly because they are entirely theoretical. We see them used all the time in science fiction, but according to Stephen Zhu from the University of Oregon, we have never found one in real life, and are most likely never going to find one, at least not anytime soon.
In theory, a wormhole is an interstellar highway that burrows through both space and time. They are tunnels through the fourth dimension that connect two points that are very far away from each other. Most theoretical physicists agree that if we were to use a wormhole, its entrance would be inside of a black hole. Either that, or we would need to produce an immense amount of energy to bring up the passage through space-time, something that's currently impossible. This leads us to another unanswered question. If scientists say wormholes are currently impossible, how can we explain the stargates and portals found all over the globe? Potential stargates have been identified at the site of Hayumarca in Peru, at Abu Ghurab in Egypt, and even at the 9,000-year-old stone circle in Lake Michigan. If there really were portals being used, they would have only existed because of wormholes. To this day, scientists can't explain the stargates or the theoretical wormholes that are allegedly lurking out in the universe. However, if there really were functional portals on the planet thousands of years ago, they must have been used by a race of highly advanced beings who figured out how to use the mysterious interstellar highways.
Neanderthal stone circles. We don't know much about our extinct cousins, the Neanderthals, but it's become increasingly clear in recent years, and as more discoveries are being made, that we need to rethink some long-held misconceptions we have about them. For example, humans tend to stereotype Neanderthals as uncivilized and, for lack of a better term, stupid. Yet there is a growing body of evidence that our early relatives were intelligent beings with complex cultures. They made their own tools, created artwork, may have mourned their dead, and possibly even had a sense of fashion. So when cave explorers discovered a series of layered ring-like structures in southwestern France in 1990, they probably weren't too quick to assume that Neanderthals had anything to do with the site. Constructed from stalagmites, the bizarre assemblages were found in a cave that had previously been closed off by a landslide. It wasn't until 2016 that researchers published a study claiming that Neanderthals built the structures at Bruniquel Cave 176,000 years ago. At the time, there were no humans in Europe yet, so it couldn't have been us. The discovery adds to the growing consensus that Neanderthals were much smarter than we give them credit for. But there are still some mysteries surrounding the site, including why the Neanderthals built the elaborate structures and why they traveled so far into the caves where they were found. There is also evidence that the occupants burned fires and charred the bones of bears or other large animals as part of the building process, but their reasons for doing so are unclear. Underwater rope monster. A very strange life form was discovered washed up on the beach of the Padre Island National Seashore in Texas. The life form is strange because it looks like a discarded pile of rope. Slimy yellow rope that's been getting soggy in a dank garbage dump. It was originally found by park guide Rebecca Clausen, who at first took it for some yellow cord that had been washed up by the current. But when she got closer, she realized it was a living organism. Its yellow strands were moving like tentacles. After a bit of confusion, Rebecca was able to identify the mysterious monster as a sea whip. It's not a pile of garbage, but a type of soft coral. This particular sea whip happened to be yellow, but they range in color from red to white to purple. What was mistaken for yellow rope is actually a part of the coral known as polyps, which are small organisms that grow one on the other in a single stem. When in the water, the sea whip grows like a tree. But when these things accidentally get uprooted and thrown on the beach, they honestly look like somebody's leftover rubbish. Hidden hatch. Last year, Julie Jukes and Roger Rockhill purchased a 55-acre property in Pennsylvania with plans to establish a home and winery. They made a series of surprising discoveries on the land, which was once a summer camp for the local Jewish community center, but one stood out above the rest. At the bottom of a rusting cylindrical tank sits a hatch hidden under bushes, which appears to lead underground. The tank sits behind a barn and is surrounded by trees, where it remains mostly hidden from view. The couple didn't even notice it was there until the fall, when the leaves left the trees bare. There is no roof on the outer cylinder, which has a waist-high, square-shaped door and is equipped with a tube resembling an air vent. It houses a smaller, similarly rusted cylindrical structure containing a square-shaped opening just big enough for a person to fit through, which leads to the hatch.
Jukes and Rockhill told The Morning Call that they attempted to open the hatch with no success and that they feared they would damage what's inside if they forced their way in. The pair took to social media for help identifying the structure. Many members of the community knew about the alleged bunker, which is rumored to be contained within a buried train caboose or a truck tanker, but nobody had ever seen it, including Eric Lightman, the executive director of the Jewish Community Center that purchased the property from a man named Robert Moyer in 1961. While some locals believe that the hatch simply leads to a water tank, others, including the new landowners, believe that there's more to the story. Is it a bunker? And if so, for what? The answer remains to be seen. Mysterious stone discs. A team of researchers found over a dozen mysterious carved discs in Russia near Volgograd. This happened back in 2015 and was immediately controversial. The research team claimed that the strange discs they found contained a high-density metal called tungsten, something found mostly in military technology. And while the origin and nature of these strange stone discs remain a mystery, many believe they could be chunks of debris from an ancient spaceship. Though the team had discovered over 12 disc-shaped rocks earlier, they recently found a much larger one. One researcher, Vadim Chernobrov, told a Russian news agency, "We already found a dozen of these discs of not more than 3 feet in diameter, and in Kuzbas a disc of about 6.5 feet in diameter. The issue is the tungsten. It shouldn't be in an ordinary rock, never mind in 12 random discs of stone buried in the Russian wilderness." UFO junkies were quick to connect the stones to extraterrestrial technology, but the stones are probably just the result of erosion. This kind of thing can happen over millions of years, which is why you can find perfectly circular rocks on just about every beach in the world. These stone discs are strange, and their chemical composition is questionable. But for now, there is no more information to go on. Virabhadra Temple. The Virabhadra Temple is a place of great mystery and intrigue, with one fascinating feature that scientists can't figure out. In order to understand this, we need to start from the beginning. Lepakshi is a small village in Andhra Pradesh, India, and it was once part of the Vijayanagara Empire. The temple was created by a pair of ambitious brothers, likely between 1530 and 1545, during the reign of King Achyuta Deva Raya. The building was an absolute masterpiece, complete with idols of Shiva, Vishnu, Nandi, and other Hindu deities. These sculptures are truly something else, and just about every surface is painted in brilliant colors and epic scenes from ancient mythologies. There is even a huge fresco of the 14 avatars of Shiva, with the deity himself wearing a garland of skulls. However, the true mystery of the temple is located in the dance hall. This place is supported by 69 pillars. It should be 70, but one of them isn't touching the ground. There is a gap between the floor of the temple and the base of the pillar that's so obvious that you can pass objects underneath it. The pillar has supposedly been hanging suspended from the ceiling of the hall for 500 years. Scientists don't understand how gravity isn't bringing the solid granite pillar down, and they just can't make sense of it.
Ghost Cavalry of Gondole. While excavating ahead of a new highway construction project in 2002, archaeologists in central France discovered a mass burial unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Dating back to the late Iron Age, the grave contained the remains of 7 men, an adolescent male, and 8 horses. They were members of a Celtic tribe called the Gauls, who originated in Western Europe during the 5th century BC. The Gauls were not a unified group with a single leader, but they came together against a common enemy when the time and place called for it. The humans were laid with their heads pointing south and their faces turned to the east. Each man's left arm was placed on the body next to him. There were no signs of injuries or violence, and the burial contained no grave goods. Experts speculated that the group might have met their untimely end while fighting the Romans. Even though the bodies didn't appear wounded, they were found near Gergovia, where Julius Caesar battled Gallic forces in 52 BC. It's also possible that the tomb's unusual arrangement had something to do with a ritual ceremony, or that the individuals were laid to rest after an intertribal dispute. Rare medieval runes. Archaeologists in Norway have discovered 2 very rare sets of medieval runes. Workers with the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research found a bone with a Norse inscription on it. They also found a rune stick with Norse and Latin text. These discoveries are the first of their kind to be made in Oslo, the capital of Norway, in over 3 decades. The bone was discovered literally just lying on the ground at Oslo's medieval park. It was picked up by one of the excavators, who immediately saw that it had runes scratched onto its surface. The bone has since been identified as the rib of either a large horse or a cow, with 14 ancient runes in total. The rune stick was found days later in a ditch, also inscribed with medieval runes from around 1100 to 1350 AD. But here's the part that may surprise you the most. Because the rune stick also had a Latin phrase written on it, with runes on the other side, specialists have already been able to figure out what it says. The Latin phrase has been translated roughly to, "You have redeemed me, O Lord, O God of truth." So, while you may expect medieval runes to be associated with some kind of Viking magic, that's not really the case. Crystal Zilmer, runology expert, says runes in medieval Europe were often used to express simple Christian prayers.
The Williamson Tunnels. Between 1810 and 1840, an eccentric tobacco merchant and philanthropist named Joseph Williamson built a series of houses and a labyrinth of underground tunnels and chambers near his home in the Edge Hill area of Liverpool, England. He passed away in 1840 without ever telling anyone what the tunnels were for. Some say that Williamson was a religious fanatic who believed Armageddon was coming. Others said that he was simply giving meaningless work to soldiers who had recently returned from the Napoleonic Wars and needed employment, gave them something to do. The tunnels were gradually filled with rubble following Williamson's death and remained inaccessible until 1995, when archaeologists began investigating them. Excavations are ongoing, with some sections of the extensive subterranean network still filled with rubble, while others have been cleared out and are open to the public. Little is known about Williamson beyond what James Stonehouse, a 19th century antiquarian, wrote about the man. Williamson apparently took his reasons for building the tunnel to his grave, and while they are being opened up for the public's enjoyment, we have no clue why he made them. Skinwalker Ranch. If there's one strange place in the US where scientists are stumped, it's Skinwalker Ranch. The property, which is 512 acres in northeast Utah, was home to an explosion of UFO sightings in the 1960s and 70s. Then, going on into the 1990s, stories came out about cattle mutilations and more alien sightings. It's also a paranormal hotspot, with a high concentration of both UFO sightings, electromagnetic anomalies, and unexplained happenings. Brandon Fugal, a real estate mogul, purchased the property in 2016 to conduct scientific research. He wanted to see if the ranch was as spooky as everyone said. He was hoping to look at things from a more scientific perspective, seeing if he could pinpoint the source of all the strangeness, whether it be a thin wall between planes of existence or just something in the soil. Fugal said that he acquired the property from billionaire Robert Bigelow for the purpose of conducting scientific research to determine if there was any validity to the extraordinary claims of paranormal activity. He said, although I acquired the ranch as a skeptic, I eventually had my own undeniable close encounter, a UFO sighting in broad daylight with multiple witnesses. But so far, nobody has come up with anything. Skinwalker Ranch is an anomaly, where people see spirits and aliens, but nobody knows why. The Patong Crater. There is a mystery hiding deep in the forests of Siberia, located in the remote area north of Irkutsk, far from curious eyes and tourist cameras. It's a towering structure of rock that looms over the otherwise bright green landscape of trees. It almost looks like a volcano, but with a strange ball-shaped formation inside of the crater. Until 1949, only a handful of locals knew about this structure. For centuries, it was considered a bad place, somewhere of great evil that even animals avoided. It wasn't until Russian geologist Vadim Kolpakov started investigating the formation that the rest of the world found out about it. According to the geologist, it reminded him of a giant pit mine at first. Then, when he examined the crater closely, he found it to be made of shattered limestone blocks. It made no sense, and clearly wasn't a mine. It was like something or someone had shattered a limestone formation to create a pit of broken shards. The phenomenon was named the Patong Crater, and we still don't know what it is. Some claim an alien ship crashed here and broke the limestone into thousands of fragments. Others say the site is an impact crater formed from a meteorite. However, the only thing scientists were ever able to learn is that the crater most likely formed roughly 500 years ago, perhaps from a steam explosion caused by underground magma emplacement.
Moray. Just outside the village of Maras in southeastern Peru, there is a large bowl-like structure consisting of enormous concentric terraces with a circular bottom. There are multiple staircases cutting through the amphitheater-like construction, which measures roughly 600 feet in diameter. Its largest circular depression is about 98 feet deep. Known as Moray, the ancient site sits approximately 11,500 feet above sea level. It was built and used by the Incas, but its purpose is a mystery. Between the top and the bottom, the temperature difference measures as much as 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The structure is equipped with an irrigation system, indicating that it may have been used for farming. Most researchers seem to agree that this is the most plausible explanation. It's also possible that the Incas used the site as a mine and then decided to grow crops over it. Evidence suggests that they might have experimented with creating different microclimates and growing plants in different conditions that were created by the various levels. In other words, it perhaps functioned as an ancient agricultural research station. It appears as though the Incas may have even brought soil samples to the site from elsewhere as part of their experiments. Since this seems to be the case, this makes Moray one of the most impressive Inca engineering projects that you probably never even knew about. Footprints on the beach. While strolling along the shoreline one day, a person discovered something shocking. They realized they were standing in the footprint of something enormous. It seemed to be some kind of dinosaur, its footprint petrified in the rock just a handful of feet away from the water. This person phoned London's Natural History Museum and told them about their discovery. Paleobiology researcher Paul Barrett went out to look. He discovered a set of dinosaur tracks moving through an area of about 164 feet long. Each print measured 1.6 feet long, although they weren't perfectly preserved. They are definitely footprints, but so old and so eroded that it's hard to tell what dinosaur made them. Paul Barrett found so many prints in the area, he believes this part of the UK must have been a stomping ground for dinosaurs, literally. In a museum press release, Barrett said so many footprints were found that it suggests a lot of dinosaurs were moving through the area. And because the UK has a fairly small record of Triassic dinosaurs, the footprints could greatly add to the understanding of what kind of prehistoric monsters lived here. But sadly, the footprints are so damaged it's impossible to say which dinosaur created them. Some seem to have been made by a giant bipedal herbivore called a sauropodomorph. It could have been one dinosaur pacing up and down the beach sometime between 237 and 201 million years ago. Or it could have been a stampede. Fosse d'Yonne. In Tonnerre in northwestern France, there is a spring called the Fosse d'Yonne, which is fed by at least one underground river as well as rainwater from nearby mountains, which travels to the spring via the limestone plateau surrounding the area. Despite what is known about the Fosse d'Yonne, there are still some mysteries surrounding it. On average, the spring gushes 311 liters of water per second, yet nobody has ever pinpointed the exact location of its source. Its centuries-long use dates back at least to Roman times, when the ancient Romans harnessed it for drinking water. The Celts treated the spring as sacred, and in the 18th century, the French placed a stone rim around the pool and used it as a public bathhouse. It was during that time that people began wondering where the apparently infinite water supply came from. Naturally, legends spread, including one claiming that the spring represented a portal to another world, and another story about a serpent that patrolled the bottom of the well. In 1974, 2 divers descended into the Fosse d'Yonne to try identifying its source. Both died, and so did another diver who attempted to explore the spring in 1996. In 2019, the mayor hired professional diver Pierre-Éric Desaigne to venture into the well's deadly depths, granting an exception to the town's diving ban, which was implemented following the 1996 fatality. Desaigne made it farther than the other divers had, traveling over 230 feet down and 1,214 feet from the entrance of the spring. He reached what he called the unknown zone, a place untouched by light and that no other human had ever accessed before. Before surfacing, Desaigne reached a gallery that he noticed was not blocked, meaning it could be possible to venture further in. but he got no closer than previous explorers to locating the spring source and believes that the mystery may never be solved. Desane said in a BBC documentary, "In fact, the springs and the galleries do not offer themselves easily. We have human and technological limits." The hanging pillar. At the 16th century Lepashki temple in India, there is something rather unusual. The Indian temple features stunning sculptures of gods and goddesses, beautiful reliefs of dancers and musicians, and countless paintings plastered over the walls. Its columns are huge, showcasing some of the most impressive architecture in the country. There is a large fresco of Virabhadra, which is the biggest fresco of an ancient god in the country. There is even a giant bull at the front of the temple carved from a single block of stone, supposedly the biggest in the world. But the incredible engineering goes one step further with a wonder that nobody can quite figure out. 70 stone pillars are supporting the ceiling, but one of them isn't touching the ground. It's floating above the surface, only about half an inch, but it's enough to pass pieces of paper, scraps of cloth, and other things directly underneath it. The pillar is simply floating, attached to the ceiling and not even touching the ground. We don't know how this is happening or exactly why the column ended up like that. Locals say it happened when a British engineer tried to remove the pillar as part of an attempt to uncover the secret of how the temple was built. But he failed. The column was dislodged, and now it floats. What's your theory? Let me know in the comments below.
The head of St. John the Baptist. In all 4 canonical Gospels of the New Testament, we hear about John the Baptist. He was killed at the behest of King Herod of Judea prior to the crucifixion of Jesus in the 1st century AD. The Gospels claim that St. John was decapitated, and his head was served on a platter. This story is not only found in the Bible, it is also in historical chronicles of the history of the Jewish people. The historian Flavius Josephus described the events of John's death almost exactly as they are depicted in Holy Scripture. Most modern-day historians agree he was almost certainly a real person, and he most likely had his head removed from his body. What scientists can't figure out is where his head went after his death. The head of John the Baptist is one of the most coveted artifacts in the world, something that can't even be confirmed as real. In the Bible, there is no mention of where John the Baptist went after he was killed. It only explains that the disciples came and took away his body. In the 4th century, rumors spread that John was buried in Palestine, but nobody has ever found his burial place or his skull. This is despite at least 4 locations claiming they currently have his head, including the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus and the Church of San Silvestro in Capite, Rome. Where do you think his head could be? Let me know in the comments below.
Rare statue of an elite woman. While digging near a citrus grove near Mexico's Gulf Coast in early 2021, a group of farmers came across a 6-foot-tall statue of a wide-eyed female. It's the first sculpture of its kind ever found in the Huasteca region, and it's unclear whether the artifact depicts a goddess, an elite woman, or perhaps contains elements of both. She bears several signs of a high-ranking social status, including an elaborate hairpiece. Archaeologists with Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History tentatively dated the statue to sometime between 1450 and 1521. They are unsure of its origins because it was found near a pre-Hispanic ruin site, but contains features that are more characteristic of the Aztec culture. The location where the farmers dug up the statue is not a known archaeological site, suggesting that it may have been brought from elsewhere. Several experts weighed in on who they thought the woman might be, but nobody could say for certain. Most only got as specific as saying that she could be a ruler from a number of different ancient cultures that are known for their depictions of powerful women. Ammunition from the Great War. A Michigan family made a very strange discovery over the weekend when they came across ammunition from World War I and a secret stash of treasure. The family was in the process of cleaning out their house when they came across what they believed was a live ammunition round. I'm not talking about a single bullet, but a massive, antique shell that would have been fired out of an artillery cannon. It was about the size of a person's arm. Naturally, the family was so freaked out that they called the police. The cops showed up, along with the Michigan State Police bomb squad. They conducted an X-ray of the relic then determined it wasn't live. Instead, the shell was being used as a secret hiding spot. They opened it up and discovered a hidden trove of antiques. There were bills dating from the 1800s, enough old coins to fill a sock, and some other random trinkets. Nobody knows exactly how the bomb ended up in their house. It must have been left behind by the previous owners, perhaps someone who had a veteran in the family. In the end, the police took the round away for proper disposal, but left the family with their newfound treasure. Underground city. In the 1980s, construction workers discovered an ancient city beneath the streets and buildings of northeastern Turkey's Aydıntepe district. Located within the Bayburt province, one of the country's least populated regions, the Aydıntepe underground city was carved over 6.5 feet below ground without any building materials. Corridors measuring 1 meter wide and 2 meters high connect what were once hallways, chambers, cellars, water sources, storage rooms, and a pool. The city dates back roughly 3,000 years and was used as a refuge from Roman persecution during early Christianity, according to the district governor. Evidence shows that Muslims also occupied the site at some point. Those sheltering in the underground city closed their secret settlement off from the outside world by covering its entrance with a round piece of rock measuring 1.5 meters in diameter. A portion of the city was open to the public last year, and excavations are ongoing. Experts believe that Aydıntepe may extend 2.5 miles further and are eagerly working to find out for sure. Throngs of visitors flock to the newly opened site, which the mayor hopes will draw increased tourism to the region, a seemingly realistic prospect considering 30,000 people traveled there last year despite the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. The Ica Stones. The Ica Stones may or may not be real. They can be traced back to Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquea, who was given a mysterious stone tablet by a Peruvian farmer. The stone showed a strange fish, one that appeared to exist long before humans ever roamed the earth. It was the doctor's impression that either aliens had given humans the insider info about the extinct fish, or the timeline of human evolution and mass extinctions were wrong. This was an intriguing idea, and so Cabrera went searching for more of these mysterious stones. He found a cave loaded with them, over 100,000 stones with unbelievable engravings, yet he told no one where this cave was, preventing thieves from taking the stones for themselves. As he found more and more of these stones, the pictures on them got even crazier. Some stones were carved with modern surgeries, flying machines, humans riding dinosaurs, and astronomical knowledge that only 20th century humans have. It was at this point that people realized Cabrera was nuts. The original farmer who gave the first stone to Cabrera admitted he had carved it himself. No scientific studies have ever been done to prove the Ica stones are genuine. And after Cabrera died in 2001, there was nobody left to say the stones were authentic. Most scientists agree they were part of an elaborate hoax to get more tourists into the region. Did it work?
The Woman and the iPhone. There is a painting from the 18th century that apparently depicts a woman engrossed in something happening on her smartphone. The painting is called The Expected One, and it was created in the year 1860. The artwork shows a woman moving down a rough dirt path through the trees. There is what appears to be a gentleman caller sitting on the rocks with a flower in hand, waiting for the girl to reach him. However, the woman doesn't see him, as her eyes are clearly fixed on the object in her hands. It looks like she's texting and completely oblivious to the world around her, fully captivated by her phone. However, there were no mobile or cellular devices in the 1800s. Ferdinand George Waldmüller, the artist behind the painting, had never seen a phone in his life. Unless he'd been given a vision of the future, there is no way he would have painted a smartphone. And although conspiracy theorists are convinced the painting is proof of time travel, experts say otherwise. Most likely, the painting shows a girl walking down a trail holding a prayer book.
Cerro Sechin. The prehistoric Chasma Sechin culture lived throughout northern coastal Peru starting as far back as 2400 BC. Its capital, Cerro Sechin, sits atop a granite hill as part of a larger complex called Sechin Alto. Located north of modern-day Lima, the site is filled with megalithic architecture, including a stepped pyramid surrounded by buildings. There is also a 13.5-foot-tall retaining wall around the perimeter, featuring hundreds of graphic bas-relief depictions of human sacrifice. Built later on in the site's history, the wall contains shocking images of victorious warriors holding their weapons and the brutally dismembered body parts of their victims. Whoever carved the reliefs made sure to include graphic depictions of severed limbs and heads, scattered organs, skewered eyeballs, and human bones. Little is known about the culture that built Cerro Sechín, which appears to have functioned as an administrative, political, and ceremonial center. This limited understanding makes it difficult for experts to interpret the violent artwork. For example, they don't know whether the images represent specific battles or rebellions, or if they have a more spiritual context, and perhaps symbolize demigods and other mythical characters. Based on the gory details in the carvings, some have suggested that the site served as a lab for anatomical studies. Either way, this civilization had an impressively advanced understanding of the human body for the time. Cerro Sechín was abandoned around 800 BC for reasons that remain a mystery to this day. Other ancient ceremonial and public centers in the region seem to have declined at around the same time, leaving behind few, if any, clues as to why. The first Brexiteer, a man with a metal detector discovered an ancient Roman coin in the middle of an English field. The coin is incredibly unique, depicting the face of the very first Brexiteer in history. It was very rare, especially for an amateur treasure hunter. The coin is about 2,000 years old. It's 24 carats and could fetch upwards of $130,000 at a London auction. The 30-year-old amateur relic hunter told local news it was the greatest discovery he has ever made. He's been using a metal detector to look for treasure for 7 years. But this is the first time he found himself a trinket that actually might make him rich. But here's the part about ancient Brexit. The coin shows the face of Roman Emperor Electus. He was in power from between 293 and 296. He ruled both Britannia and Northern Gaul, modern-day France, as a single independent nation. He is the first one in the modern calendar to remove Britain from a larger empire. Without Electus, Britain very well may have stayed in the Roman Empire all the way until it collapsed. But he pulled out, kind of like how Britain was just pulled out of the EU. The Jersey House of Horror. International headlines rarely report much from the Channel Islands, a sleepy archipelago located in the English Channel off the French coast of Normandy. But in 2008, media outlets around the world reported the discovery of human bone fragments, secret underground rooms, and narratives of abuse at Haut de la Garenne, a former orphanage located on the island of Jersey. Stories of punishment rooms containing shackles and blood-stained bathtubs fueled widespread suspicions that terrible things happened here. The bone fragments mostly belong to animals, and those identified as human date back several centuries, ruling out any recent killings. But the official investigation, codenamed Operation Rectangle, uncovered disturbing evidence of child abuse dating back to 1945. Horrifying acts allegedly took place in an underground network of 4 rooms where orphans were severely punished. The physical evidence spoke for itself. Within these rooms, police reportedly found shackles and a concrete bath, as well as graffiti stating, "I've been bad for years and years." The ominous message was accompanied by the claims of over 100 victims who shared their stories with authorities. Several former employees were charged, but many defended themselves against or flat out denied the allegations they faced. An official report found that the facility was an unsuitable substitute parent, and survivors who pursued a civil lawsuit were compensated. It is hard to even imagine what went on at this house of horrors. Thanks for watching! If you'd like to learn about more underground discoveries, let me know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!